Hello, everybody. My name is Anita Adams. I'm a counselor at the Student Parent Center, and I'll be joined in a little bit by Tommy Lanier, who's the program coordinator for the Student Parent Center. Although we're from the Student Parent Center, this workshop is definitely not just for student parents. We're particularly, targeting students who are reentry, CalVet, or student parents, of course, and Berkeley Hope Scholars. So welcome. Thank you for we'll get started. So first, we're going to cover some financial aid basics and talk about, what you're currently packaged as. That way you can understand if the COAAR is even necessary for you. Then we'll do a deep dive into the COAAR form, how to fill it out, and then followed by a non-recorded Q&A. So that way, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to answer them as we go. But also, if you have individual questions, I'm happy to do that after me and Tommy will be here for a Q&A. So let me just get this out of the way for me. So financial aid really has three parts, and all the parts make up the equation of how your aid is calculated. So first is your estimated family contribution. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's how much the university thinks that you can afford to put towards your education and or your parents if you're a dependent. Your cost of attendance, which is also known as your budget. So that's how much it's estimated, how much financial aid you'll be able to get, grants, scholarships, loans. So you cannot get more financial aid than what your cost of attendance is. So that's why it's really important to be able to adjust your cost of attendance. One moment, sorry. There we go. And then finally, let's go back. Oop. Finally, your awards. So this is the financial aid you actually receive, right? So that could be scholarships, it could be grants, and it could also be loans. So know that primarily today we're going to be talking about the second piece, the cost of attendance. So your aid is determined by taking your cost of attendance, and then they subtract your estimated family contribution, and that's your eligibility for aid. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get grants and scholarships to fill that up. Oftentimes when this increases, it is offered in loans, and we'll talk more about that, but not always. So it's important to increase or to change either your EFC, if you can lower it, that'll help increase your aid, or raise your cost of attendance, right, to allow yourself to get more aid. So first of all, just real quick, the way you would find your EFC, this is Cal Central My Finances page, and then you click View Awards. On the very left-hand column, you'll see this financial aid scholarship profile. So you're going to want to check here first to see if your EFC is a 0. Many students are, but also if you had income reported in 2020, it may not be a 0 there. So you can adjust your EFC with something called a family contribution appeal. So this is kind of a first step before you even do your cost of attendance. So if this is something you may qualify for, it's really worth your time to do it, because this can definitely increase your aid. So this year's aid is based on 2020 here. Why is it not letting me add people? It's based on 2020 financial information. So if your financial information has changed since 2020, you might, your resources have gone down, or maybe your, if you were married, or your parents were married and they got divorced or separated, that would be an option to do the family contribution. Next, we'll talk a little bit about what your estimated cost of attendance is right now. So if you go to the same Cal Central, this is going to look very familiar to all of you. This center section is your estimated cost of attendance, and you can expand, click on those little arrows to expand and see the individual categories that they're giving you. So this will be important because you want to know if you even need to do a cost, if your expenses are higher than the categories that they're giving you. So first off, you're going to want, like housing is a great example. Lots of people, the housing expenses significantly more So this example is somebody that was living off campus. And so they're allotted 11,462 for the academic year. And the way you're going to find out the monthly amount is to divide that number by 9. Because and knowing that there are 9 months in the academic year is important. So summer is separate. So when you're so this, off-campus housing equals $1,273 per month. So if your actual housing expense is more than this, then that's a good opportunity to do the cost of attendance. And you're going to want to do this with the transportation. You can look at what they're giving you and think of areas where you can add on. So how will the budget, the increased cost of attendance actually be funded? This is really important. Oftentimes it is going to be funded in additional loans right off the bat. Every person's individual case is different, and we want to stress that. You don't know until you do the cost of attendance, or if you talk to a specialized financial aid advisor who can look at your package and actually tell you what the change would make. It's really important to apply for scholarships for this reason, because our cost of attendance is just higher than what they're allotting for. So if you don't want to take out loans, it gives you scholarship eligibility. So oftentimes Berkeley students are fully packaged, right? So you have no scholarship eligibility right now. By increasing your cost of attendance, you allow yourself to be awarded additional scholarships. So it's really important if you're applying for outside scholarships as well to do a cost of attendance, or maybe you applied for a scholarship at your community college, or got awarded a scholarship already. Increasing it, you may have aid left on the table that scholarship pushed out. So it is important. And then loans, of course, that most of it will be covered in loans to get started. And yeah, so it is what it is, but it's still really worthwhile doing the COAAR. So we'll get started on the categories. So I'm going to share this slideshow. That way you guys can see step by step. But so this is a big one: rent, mortgage, and utilities. So the standard budget really varies depending on where you live, if you're on campus, if you're off campus, or at the village. The only cost you can include in this item is the actual rent or mortgage. If you have a mortgage, unfortunately, property taxes, stuff like that cannot be added on. It's just whatever the cost of the mortgage is. There's no need to include utilities this year. You may have done utilities in the past, but they're actually going to be automatically adding on an allowance for utilities. So you don't need to worry about providing documentation for that. A big one is if you're married or living with another adult, a partner or a family member over the age of 18, they're going to assume that the rent is split equally, even though that may not be the case for you, right? So if you have a special circumstance where say you have a stay-at-home partner who might be providing childcare, somebody may be disabled, there may be a reason why that person is not providing towards the rent. You would want to write a letter explaining the circumstance, especially if you're a parent. Because for student parents, a lot of the single student parent, the housing expenses will be covered in grant money. So this is a big opportunity. So if you are having a partner or somebody that's living with you not contributing, it's really important that you say that. The documentation you can use for this, it could be various things. So a month, if you have a bill from the mortgage or lease, if you have a signed agreement with the homeowner. So oftentimes with shared housing situations, you may be paying, renting a room, and that's perfectly fine. You would just go ahead and get documentation from the homeowner, which could be like a letter that you guys both sign, just saying what is your share of the housing cost. And if you have any questions, I say always submit it. And if the financial aid will hopefully take it. If they don't, they'll contact you and work it out. So transportation is another huge category for all students. The standard budget is it's very small. It's less than $1,000 for the entire academic year. So the cost to include in this item could be commuting to and from school, including dropping your kids off at their school if you have children. So the way you would calculate this is you take the standard mileage rate, which is right there, 0.625, and you would just calculate out the entire route. So times 2 ways, and then you would multiply that by 7 days, 4 weeks in a month, or 4.3 weeks in a month to get your semester or your academic year long. And that's kind of where the help template I included, and I'll link to that again for those of you that joined late, can come in handy. I actually have the equation written out. This could also include parking, like a parking pass on campus, or if you pay maybe you pay a garage for parking, public transportation costs, and tolls. Another big one, even if you're not commuting, you can request flights home, and I put that in quotes, during breaks, with your children, right? So it's for you and any dependents. Unfortunately, you cannot put your partner there. So, and then home can be determined in many different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to mean like, you moved up to Berkeley from somewhere else. It could be that, it's where a family member lives, or, you just have to make a case to why that is your home. And you get 2 domestic trips, or if you're going international, it's 1 trip allowed per academic year. And you don't actually have to buy the tickets. You don't have the money for it yet, right? So you can't. The way you would document the flights home is with a shopping cart. So go to Southwest or United, type in all the information, get a booking, and just save that shopping cart. And that's enough documentation for the cost of that. To document the commuting expenses, what you would want to do is do a printout of Google Maps, and just from your house to the campus, or if you're dropping kids off along the way, the whole route. And that's the mileage number you're going to use in your calculation. If you have parking or tolls, you can provide a week's receipts, or, if it's the toll page, you could go on and do a statement showing the tolls, and they'll just extrapolate all this information out for the entire year. You don't have to do it all. And then let's see. Yeah. And the one thing about the plane tickets is you need to get 21 days advance notice. So if you're working on your core right now, I'd recommend that you can do it during winter break and spring break. You have enough time notice for that. And oftentimes that'll be more realistic prices, because you're not going to be able to fly midweek, right? Like you will need to fly on breaks, and those tickets generally are more expensive during those times. So it's good that you use a realistic cost for those. So the next one is the computer. So the standard budget is nothing. So this maximum add-on, this is the one item where there is a hard cap on the amount of money you can request, and that's $3,000. So the cost could be a computer of your choosing. It can include any other tech supplies you might need, say a printer, accessories, software, whatever you want to put in this category. It just needs to, or try to, maximize it by getting it to add up to 3,000. So if you go on apple.com, that's real easy to do with basically one of their bigger computers. And this one, again, you don't have to buy it in advance, because of course you don't have the money to do so. So you would document that with a shopping cart, or if you went out and purchased a computer for this semester, it would be your actual cost, that, your receipt. So you can use either. And I want to welcome Tommy. Hey, Tommy.
Hey, Anita. What's up, everybody? Thank you for your patience with me. And thank you, Anita, for getting the party started.
Yeah.
All righty. So do I take it from here, or would you like me to start with the next one?
You can take the next one or the next few if you'd like. I just got done with computer.
All right. Well, let's keep going. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Tommy Lanier, Program Coordinator for the Student Parent Center. And this section is for medical and dental. The standard budget, oh my gosh, there is no standard budget. So the cost to include in this item, as it says, expenses not covered by insurance, including co-pays. checkups, lab work, prescription drugs, optical, dental, physical therapy. This is a big one. This last one, you guys, psychological counseling. Why? Because two things. It could be very stigmatizing and people opt out, or it's stigmatizing, people opt in, but opt out of submitting it on a COAAR because of stigma. It's like, well, I don't want people to know that. The reason why I bring that up is because just like any other expense covered through your insurance provider, you can redact and black out certain things as far as what you want to keep confidential, all right? It's really the price that's the bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line. That's a big, big, big thing that I want to over communicate. And then, of course, naturally, any medical or dental expenses for your children, including any copays or dental expenses like braces, which are not cheap. And then one more time, that psychological counseling piece, that also applies to the little ones if it is necessity outside of what you can cover through your insurance and you have that proper documentation. Documentation here, like a lot of other things on the COAAR form, copy of billing statement or estimate, including your name, cost, date, and type of treatment. The billing statement or the estimate must indicate the amount paid by the insurance, okay? So naturally, there is something that has to be covered by insurance. Everything after that, that's COAAR applicable. One thing that I did want to say is in line with just the psychological counseling piece, on this documentation, if there are things there that you're like, yo, I'd rather people not know that part, they don't have to know that part, okay? So just saying, yo, just saying, you can take that part out of the equation. Yep. All right. The meat and potatoes, okay? Student parents, here we go. Child care expenses, standard budget, none, all right? Standard budget, none. Costs to include in this item, costs for child care for dependents under the age of 14 or older in special circumstances. Now, people who have been with us Tuesday for our Zoom and in-person COAAR workshop, and for folks who might have been able to join me and Luis Hernandez at the Cal Veteran Student Services workshop, I spoke on this as well, that part that says older in special circumstances, what I'm really speaking to is, an example of that is, let's say you have a dependent physically over the age of 14, but cognitively under the age of 14. And because of that, that's a special circumstance. You know what I mean? And just like childcare for dependents under the age of 14 proper can be provided by a licensed provider or a friend or family member. Little asterisk, and I want to kind of play off of what we did Tuesday. If you're married, the spouse or someone else in the household, they must be working or a student. They must be occupied. Why? Because logistically, you might be flagged for questioning after the fact. If you submit something for housing and you say, well, there's someone in the home and they can't contribute financially because they're watching the kids. The question would become, well, why are you submitting costs for childcare expenses? The exception would be the special circumstance. So it's not trying to deter you or discourage you, but just keep that in mind when you fill out a COAAR. This is very important. Documentation for licensed providers, 2 canceled checks, and a copy of the invoice or contract for non-licensed providers. Licensed providers, ECEP, Early Childhood Education Program, YMCA, anybody native to the Bay Area, Berkeley, California, Oakland, the Sheldon School, Color Me Children, places like that. Okay, 2 canceled checks, copy of the invoice or contract. Non-licensed providers. Who is that? Auntie Pearl, Uncle Lewis, Grandma so-and-so. That's fine. 2 canceled checks, Venmo or Zelle transactions are fine, and a signed letter from the provider. What should be on the letter is your name, the person's name watching the dependent. I'm going to say you may or may not need to submit the dependent's name more than this is the service that you're providing or having provided to you at this cost, monthly, weekly, and that shows up beyond what you've already been given. If I had to say yes or no to put in your child's name, I would say yes, if there's nothing stopping you. And then, of course, it gets overlooked, but it is very, very important. Make sure that it's signed. Do you have to get it notarized? Probably not, but if you can, that doesn't hurt. But the takeaway is childcare expenses can be supplemented for you, whether you're at a licensed, accredited location like ECEP, that's just off the top of my head, or you have something else going on where it's a friend or a family member. We just want to make sure that you don't opt out unnecessarily. Righty, special books and supplies, standard budget, $1,100, what, $1,140. Cost to include in this item, items needed in addition to regular required materials, includes computer supplies. So the examples are pretty spot on. Lab equipment, art supplies, other special equipment, documentation, itemized list approved by an advisor, including travel. Items must be required for all students in the class. So for example, it can't be something that's, you know, pretty beneficial, pretty dope, but I just want it, you know what I mean? Everybody has to have, it basically has to be mandated for the class. It can't necessarily be a matter of preference more than a matter of need that you need to have met. So that's what I mean by that. And yeah. Oh boy. Another big one. We talked about this Tuesday. We talked about this at the Cal Vet Services Center COAAR Workshop, student parents. Relocation expenses. The standard budget is none. Cost to include in this item, rental vehicle expenses, including gas. Notice how we didn't say, I got a big, 50 by 50 U-Haul truck. You know what I mean? It could be a van, it could be a car that you might, just like childcare. Hey, my uncle let me use the car to relocate. That vehicle, including the expenses, including gas, real important asterisk here. The relocation expenses do not include security deposits, purchase of household items, flights, other expenses related to security living arrangements prior to the start of the term. So we just want to bring home, like, this is more of a verb than a noun or adjective. You know what I mean? It's for the process of relocating. Documentation, pretty straightforward. Receipts for actual rental vehicle expenses, including gas receipts. And Anita brought up something really important on Tuesday I want to piggyback on, is that if you have bank statements, sometimes you don't have receipts, you know what I mean? If you have bank statements, we don't have to know your, account number, well, financial aid doesn't have to know your account number and home address, and as long as they can see, like, this is where I paid for the gas, this is where I paid for the vehicle, that's about it. That's about it. So we don't want people to panic and say, oh man, I don't remember that. You know what I mean? Do moving pods count for relocation? This is a question real quick. Do moving pods count for relocation vehicle expenses, or does it have to be a vehicle truck? When you say pod, do you mean like a trailer, Melissa, that you had, like, you kind of attach to the vehicle and take with you?
No, it's a service that came and picked it up, held it for a few days. Like if there was a lag time in between moving from one place to the other, held it for a few days and then delivered it. So they picked it up, they moved it and brought it to you.
I've seen people do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all good. Thanks
Yeah.
for asking the question. Yep, so yes, if you, so Melissa's question, if you have a moving pod and your relocation was done like that, yes, because that is a rental vehicle expense. That's a travel rental. You rented a travel service to relocate from one place to the next, and you pay for that out of pocket. So no reason to believe that should be dismissed. That should be just fine.
And one little caveat, this does need to be done in your first year at Cal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you were a spring admit, you might have moved before the last spring. Unfortunately, because that was a different academic year, it's too late for this one. But if you moved this year to start, for your first term, then this is a good one.
Yeah. All right. Research, fieldwork, or thesis expenses. kind of similar, kind of, but not really, but kind of similar to special supplies for class. Standard budget, no, none, nothing at all. Cost to include in this item, any expenses that you incur for your research, field work, or thesis. Pretty straightforward. Excuse me. Items as far as documentation. Itemized list approved and signed by faculty advisors, including travel. The advisor has to specify the costs are required educational costs. So it kind of toggles back to the need. It's a requirement. Professional development costs are not allowed, even though conferences are dope. Symposiums are dope. It's not allowed in this line item of the cost of attendance adjustment request form. So pretty straightforward with this. And yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tommy.
Welcome.
So now we'll get into the actual, how do you fill out the core? So we talked about what you're going to put on it, but now this is how you're going to fill out the form. So first of all, you're going to find it on your My Finances page under communication. You're going to click on this verification and appeals form. And that'll take you to another website. You probably used that website when you did your verification, or if you're doing an estimated family contribution, that would also be on this website. So first off, you're going to want to make sure you click this little page icon. That's kind of get to your appeals. There'll be nothing here, most likely. And then you click on the right-hand corner, manage requests. And so then this takes you to the next window, which this is where you'll actually select either the family contribution appeal or the cost of attendance adjustment, and you can do both. So you would do a little plus next to the cost of attendance adjustment request. And now this first question, this is just, don't spend too much time on this. This is just to be able to get into the form. It's asking, why are you, explain your reason for the request. So you could copy and paste exactly what I put here, or you could put it into your own words, but basically your actual expenses are higher than the estimated cost of attendance. And then you click submit, and this is going to allow you to get into the form. So now every time you come to this page, you'll see the core right here, and you would click on that to be able to enter. And now we're almost there. One more button. So you would click fill out here. And that'll take you into the live form. Some things to note about the live form is it does not save. So it'll save once you hit submit, but if you have to leave, if something happens, so I really highly discourage you from writing what you're writing into the form. I think it's really useful to do it in a separate window in your notes, or you can use that Word document that I shared with you and just make a copy of that and start typing your relevant information into that document. So the first, what you would want to do in the statement of circumstance is briefly explain each item you're requesting for. Just make the people at financial aid's life easy, right? So they're going to get all of your documents, and you're just giving them a narrative. What is this stuff and why are you requesting? So for housing, that's pretty simple. My rent is this, right? Or my portion of the rent is this. See attached letter. And then for transportation, you would want to say if you're driving, why you need to drive. For those of you that commute, it's pretty obvious if you live far from campus. But say you live in Berkeley, but you need to drive for another reason. That's where you're going to want to write why you're driving. So if you're a student parent, oftentimes we want to drive. That way, if we have to pick our kids up from school unexpectedly, that's a great reason. Or if you're disabled and you can't, riding public transportation does not work, then you can write that, whatever your reason for driving. And then also you're going to want to talk about those plane tickets home. You're going to want to talk a little bit about what is home. So that would be your who you're visiting and where they live would be sufficient there, and why you're visiting them. Like if it's not obvious, like I'm visiting my mom or I'm visiting my aunt, right? If it's I'm visiting my good friend, then you explain why that is home, right, to you. And then here it's going to ask you to check these boxes on what you're requesting. You can put whatever you'd like here. It isn't going to make a radical difference they'll give you as much aid as you qualify for. So, but definitely select work study if that's something you're looking for, or loans. You can always adjust that in the system later on. So this form, unfortunately, I don't have screenshots of everything. But the next item, when it's a fill-in box, so it'll ask housing and you fill in the number either per month or per year. It'll say in the fill-in box, and then it'll ask for each individual category that we've covered, how much are you requesting? And that's the extent of the form. It really is. So that statement of circumstance is important because that's where you're going to explain things. And then the very next page, so you'll hit submit. When you submit the form, you're required to use your PIN that you set up during verification. Sometimes it can be hard to remember your PIN. So if you don't know it, that's okay. You can reset it, but it does help to know it's 5 digits. So if that helps you remember what it could be, it is a weird number there, 5 digits. And then you'll come into a page like this, where every category that you selected, you wanted to add stuff to, will have an option to add a documentation for it. So you'll see housing, transportation, computer, all of those categories, and then you'll click where the arrow is add, and you can upload as many pages as you need to. And then eventually, once you have all your documentation in, you can hit submit, and you're done. So timeline. Oh, you're muted still, Tommy.
I knew that. I just want to see if everybody else knew that. You know what I'm saying? I was just practicing. All right. Me. Timeline. So the timeline for the COAAR takes approximately 2 to 4 weeks to process. Now, those of you in our student parent class, if you remember the presentation, 2 to 4 weeks to process, but as Anita and I have shared, and in the class, if there are special circumstances, it could be sooner than that. If proper paperwork isn't there, or there are special circumstances in the other direction, it might be longer than that. So we really encourage you to just rein in proper documentation and the clearest explanation you can give to any special circumstances. So it really is that 2 to 4 weeks to process. Usually it is, even with special circumstances, but just want to over communicate that. That's my mantra these days. Due dates. Everybody who is not graduating this semester, April 8th, 2023, please don't wait until April 8th, 2023. If you don't have to, you know what I'm saying? If you don't have to, if you have to, April 8th, that's your day, cool. But if you can do it before then, please do. If you're graduating in the fall, this semester, right now, last one, November 18th is the deadline. So you still have some time. And that 2 to 4 weeks is not, the 2 to 4 weeks and the deadline process, they're not mutually exclusive, meaning if you submit it on the deadline, it's still 2 to 4 weeks. So we just want to make sure folks aren't, too anxious if they're right at that deadline. Yeah. I think you might be muted this time.
No, I did it.
Right. She was just practicing. She was practicing
Yep.
too. You know what I'm saying? That's cool.
And I was going to say with that deadline, if there's an emergency situation, like a medical need or any sort of situation where you really need this processed right away, communicate that to your advisor. Like that could be me and Tommy, if you're a student parent, could be Charlie or Matt, if you're a Berkeley Hope Scholar, or Trin and Amanda, if you're a reentry student. They can connect you with a specialized financial aid advisor that can expedite the process. Now, what that expediting looks like depends a lot on, what's going on in financial aid at the moment, but they can do that if there's an emergency need. Perfect. Well, I am going to stop the recording and we can go into questions. I'm sure you guys have lots.